On today's show, we're going to do an exercise we know the people love, round by round favorite picks. Evan and I will each give the player we are ideally targeting in each round of home league fantasy football drafts. We'll discuss and debate those. Want to be clear on a couple of things here. Good home league average draft position is really tough to find. We have the ADP for both Yahoo and ESPN up on ETR right now, but there are some crazy things on there. I don't think in actual drafts, it'll actually play out the way Yahoo ADP or ESPN ADP looks. We've done our best here to guess where these guys will go, but it's not going to be perfect. Round one, obviously, a huge part of round one isn't just who you like, it's where you pick. So unfortunately, it's not like an auction. Hopefully you guys listen to the auction bros, listen to the auction pod with Eibel. We're going to be handcuffed here, though, to where we land. Evan, what are you thinking ideally in round one?
Yeah, so I hope that the people don't take this as a sort of cop out, but I've come to the conclusion that I like the number 5 overall pick the best, and I'm just willing to take whichever one of Christian McCaffrey, Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, Brees Hall, Bijan Robinson, whichever one of those guys falls to me. Back in the day, Jonathan Bales did a study looking at a bunch of historical high stakes drafts, and he found that picking toward the middle is the most optimal draft slot. And 5 is very close to the middle. And I'm sure that changes year to year, but I think that this is a year where drafting at number 5 is optimal because you get the faller from that top 5. I think that there's a tier unto itself of those top 5 players. Give me the guy at the bottom, and then I can pick earliest on the wrap.
Agreed. And I agree with that top 5. I would take it a step further. I actually think the 1 pick is my favorite this year. I know that goes against what Evan's saying about drafting in the middle. I do think there's a tier break between Christian McCaffrey and these other guys. I know some people might disagree, but more important to me is round 2 is so flat. So like picking at the last pick of round 2 does not bother me whatsoever this year. It is just so flat. So ideal for me would be getting the 1 and Christian McCaffrey. The ideal for me beyond that would be what Evan said, get one of the top 5. If I don't get in there, I like to start, and I miss on CMC, Bijan, and Brees. I'm looking at a wide receiver and then running back start. My 2 favorite ways to start there would be Amon-Ra St. Brown or AJ Brown. I prefer them to guys like Saquon or Jonathan Taylor, even though my strategy this year in home leagues is to be running back heavy in round 1 and round 2. I just think Amon-Ra and AJ Brown are such better ways to start a team. And then there's plenty of running back options in round 2, which we can come back on, which we'll get to here in a second. Round 1 is never the most interesting. Let's get to round 2, Evan. What are your ideal targets in round 2?
Well, regardless of where I end up drafting or who I take, with my first pick, I want to make sure that I come out of the top 2 rounds with a stud running back, because I think that there's this tier of 3 up top with McCaffrey, Bijan, and Brees Hall, and then I think that there are 2 guys that stand out, both second-year players that have a chance to jump into that tier this year, making second-year leaps: Jahmyr Gibbs and Devon Achane. And Jahmyr Gibbs, sometimes he'll go in the back end of the first, but I think most often he goes very early in the second round. And then, so if I'm drafting early in the second round, I'm all over Jahmyr Gibbs. And then if I'm drafting toward the end of the round, I'm looking at Devon Achane, who generally makes it past the middle of that round and to me at the end. So depending on where I'm drafting, those are the 2 guys that I'm looking at. And I want to make sure I come out of the first 2 rounds with either an established elite fantasy running back in that first tier, or a guy who can become that in Gibbs or Achane.
Yeah, and as we talked about in the running back show, I am perfectly fine with running back starts. If you told me that I got the 1 pick and I started CMC Achane, like, let me fist pump that in.
Yeah.
Because I can go, and I'm going to talk about a bunch of wide receivers that I can go through the middle rounds here as we move on this show that I can get. I think what Evan said about Gibbs, I think it is the same way I feel. I think he should go 12th, 11th, or 12th, most likely. But in a lot of leagues, he won't because people are worried about David Montgomery. He's had this hamstring issue, etc. If you can get Gibbs in round 2, I think that is pretty strong. That would be ideal for me. And the Achane stuff I agree with too. If you can't get on those guys, my ideal target in round 2 would be Kyren Williams. I understand that Blake Corum was drafted in the 3rd round, That doesn't mean that Kyren's suddenly going to go from 90 to 100% of the running back touches to 50% of the running back touches. I still expect Kyren to be a massive workhorse as long as he's healthy. I mean, this is what Sean McVay does. He annually tries to ride one back. And I don't just mean Todd Gurley or Kyren Williams. Sean McVay tried to just ride one back with Cam Akers, with Darrell Henderson, with a ton of other dusty backs. This is what he likes to do, to ride one back hard. So I know there's a lot of Blake Corum FUD out there on Kyren. I know there's a lot of foot injury FUD on Kyren. I think that he is still an awesome target here in the middle of round 2. So if I can't get Gibbs or Achane, totally fine with Kyren. One other comment on Achane as a target in round 2. We've been getting, I guess, I don't want to say pushback, Evan, because a lot of people are super in on Achane. There's a lot of people that are kind of out on Achane big time also. And I get what they're saying. They're saying, how can a guy who could not hold up to the workload he had last year, how can we project him for more of a workload after they bring back Mostert, after they draft Jalen Wright? I think my point would be players who can score 40 points in a fantasy game are so hard to come by. And Devon Achane's floor, 10, 12 touches, is enough to warrant a lot of these other guys getting 18 or 19 touches. So I actually like the volatility on Achane. Him getting hurt a lot doesn't bother me. Will have a strong bench that I can put in if that does happen. That's not the way I play fantasy. But yeah, Evan, any more response to people who are kind of lukewarm on Achane in round 2?
I mean, he's also got, this is his second season in the NFL. The coaching staff is going to feel more comfortable with him. He's spent an entire offseason in training camp. He's gone through training camp healthy, knock on wood. But I mean, he's, spent this time in an NFL, weight room. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons to expect him to be healthier in his second season than he was in his first. And, they are going to limit his touches to an extent. That's something that you have to deal with. I mean, they have Mostert. They traded up to draft Jalen Wright. He's not going to lead the league in touches, but I think he's going to catch a ton of passes. We've seen him split out wide, catching 20-yard balls in the preseason. And he's going to get plenty of carries. And they are going to limit his workload, and that will raise his probability of staying healthy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what we want when we show up to the playoffs in fantasy is guys who can just completely break the slate, and Achane can certainly do that. All right, let's go to round 3. Evan, who is your ideal target in round 3 in 2024 fantasy drafts?
So I'm kind of basing this. How did my first 2 rounds go? Obviously, is going to help dictate what I'm going to do in the second round. If I'm going running back here, I'm on Josh Jacobs. I think that he could compete for the NFL lead in touches, in yards from scrimmage. A.J. Dillon is not good at the game. And Marshawn Lloyd just can't get out of the tub. So he has very little competition for work in the backfield. He's a guy who has proven himself to be a capable NFL workhorse. We love the run blocking situation in Green Bay and love the complexion of the offense as a whole. And he's a quality player. If I'm going receiver, Nico Collins, who I have as my number 16 or 17 overall player, but people have trepidation about him. The Texans acquired Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell in his second year. But to me, like, Nico Collins is atop that receiver core clearly as the X receiver in the Kyle Shanahan style offense, where Brandon Marshall has dominated, Julio Jones has dominated, Andre Johnson has dominated, Brandon Ayuk began to dominate last year. Nico Collins himself dominated last year. He's big, he's athletic. He showed that he answered questions about his run after catch. He's one of the best deep crossing route runners in the NFL. So dangerous on those routes. And I think that C.J. Stroud, I think that all 3 of these receivers are going to eat, but Nico Collins is going to eat the most. And I'm really high on him. If I can get him in the 3rd round, that's a complete steal as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. So a couple things I would say. I personally prefer Isaiah Pacheco to Josh Jacobs. However, Pacheco's starting to go in round 2 a lot. If Pacheco makes it to round 3 in your league and you only have 1 running back so far, my ideal target would indeed be Pacheco. In terms of more pure round 3 guys, I had Nico Collins in there. Also, I think the one point I would add to what Evan said is that there's room for Texans to throw it a ton more. Their PROE, pass rate over expectation, and their first down throw rate last year was not high. Like, it can get way higher now that they have year 2 for Stroud. Now that they have Steph Diggs and Tank Dell healthy
Now they
as
have
well.
their offensive line healthy. They
Yeah.
play indoors. Their secondary could be an issue, leading to more, pass aggressive situations. I mean, they're going to throw the ball more. Period. You don't add Stephon Diggs to your receiver core and throw the ball less.
Okay. So my ideal, after I've said all that, oh, and I had Drake London on my list as well, but my ideal that I am going to go with here in round 3 is going to be a surprise to some people. It is Jalen Hurts, quarterback for the Eagles. The default rankings on ESPN and Yahoo and Sleeper are like so egregious at wide receiver this year that I'm not worried. If I start running back, quarterback like this, I'm still not worried. I'm still confident that I can end up with one of the best wide receiver rooms in the entire league because I'm going to get some amazing guys later who I'll talk about. So I am fine with Jalen Hurts here in round 3. All the quarterbacks in your home league are likely to go far too high. Hurts, though, his ADP on Yahoo, I think is roughly where it should. It's not a bargain, but like Josh Allen is going 10 spots higher than Jalen Hurts is. And to me, that's not right. So I think Jalen Hurts, out of all the quarterbacks where the ADP is on Yahoo, is actually the one where it's closest to being right. So I'm going to go with Jalen Hurts here for me in round 3. I do think the Kellen Moore stuff is big for Jalen Hurts. It seemed like there was a real problem going on between Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni or whatever else happened there last year. So, yeah. All right. Let's go to round 4, Evan. Who is your ideal target in round 4?
Well, it's Malik Neighbors, and I do think that as we get closer to the season and all the hype around Malik Neighbors has really picked up from training camp practices to preseason games, that he might end up sneaking into the 3rd round in some home leagues. But right now, his ADP is closer to the 5th round, technically, on the sheet. So I felt like this was a somewhat safe pick. Malik Neighbors, I'm smashing the button on him if he makes it to the 4th round, really regardless of how my draft has started. I think that he can blow the doors off in terms of target volume, and I think he's an awesome player. I mean, I think that there is a very realistic chance that he outscores Marvin Harrison as a rookie.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting on Neighbors. And by the way, I had Neighbors as one of my ideal round 4 picks also. I thought an interesting thing, Evan, I'm not sure what you think about this, but there were some people that I really respect, Davidow and a couple other people who said, yeah, those Daniel Jones highlights were really bad, but he actually didn't play that poorly. Like Daniel Jones was actually okay in that game, despite the disastrous highlights and everybody dunking on him on Twitter.
Yeah.
So that gave me a little bit more confidence on Neighbors that, like, listen, Daniel Jones is bad. He's not like the absolute stone cold worst quarterback in the NFL like some people think. I don't know, but at least maybe the preseason performance, I guess, was not as bad as Twitter perceived it to be, would be, I guess, my main point.
We clipped something about me talking about how I wanted to get Malik Neighbors on all my fantasy teams, and one of the responses was, "Oh yeah, well that's not going to go very well when Daniel Jones averages 150 passing yards per game."
Yeah.
I mean, do you know how low 150 passing yards per game is? Number one. Number two, before last season when he barely played, he had never averaged fewer than 200 passing yards per game in a season. So I mean, it's just ridiculous statements. Fear over the quarterback situation. I think the fear over the quarterback situation is extremely overblown. You also have to consider that Daniel Jones has never had a quality wide receiver, and now he does. And Brian Daboll has always been a guy willing to drop his quarterback back to pass a lot. And you got Drew Lock, who I think is a quality backup behind Daniel Jones. I'm really not. I think that that's an overblown concern as it pertains to Malik Neighbors, who is going to dominate targets for the Giants.
For sure. I mean, easily could lead the NFL in target share as a rookie, which would just be absolutely insane. Insane. Okay. So my ideal for round 4 is one that Evan had for round 5. So I'll hold off on talking about that one. Definitely wide disparity in Rashee Rice's ADP. We'll get to that in a second. I'll go with one of my other targets for round 4. That is Jalen Waddle of the Dolphins. I want to continue to hammer these mispriced wide receivers through the middle rounds. Jalen Waddle's per route stats last season were actually really strong. I get that he's the wide receiver 2 on his own team, but this Dolphins offense is so concentrated, especially in the pass game. And so I think Jalen Waddle, people have been disappointed maybe by him. The Dolphins aren't. Evan and I talked about that recently by the contract that they gave him. And I think anytime Tyreek doesn't play, Waddle goes completely nuclear. And even when Tyreek does play, I think Jalen Waddle is underrated. So totally fine starting to load up my wide receiver core here with Neighbors Waddle. I mentioned Rashee Rice, who Evan's going to talk about next. That's where I kind of think that it's fine to start building your wide receiver room this way. Whereas in best ball or competitive leagues, those guys are going in like round 2 and in some cases higher. So yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just going straight off at we're going into the 5th round here.
Yeah, let's go to the 5th round here, Evan.
Yeah, I'm going straight off the sheet here. Actually, I'm not, because technically on Yahoo ADP, Rashee Rice's ADP is in the early 6th round, which is ridiculous and influenced by people drafting earlier when there was fear that he was going to be suspended. That fear has dissipated now. If he, again, I'm smashing the button on Rashee Rice if he lasts in the 5th round. I think he's worth, actually, I have him rated as a 3rd round pick, and certainly would take him even in the 4th round.
Yeah.
But here I'm kind of splitting the difference, and he is my priority target. If in any way, the first pick of the 5th round, of course, I'm taking Rashee Rice. This is a guy who last year caught 79 passes, scored 7 touchdowns, despite playing 58% of the Chiefs' offensive snaps. You have the Chiefs' intent, and obviously his role grew, and he's going to be he should be an every down player this season. They're scaling back Travis Kelce in order to try to keep him fresh for the playoffs. Hollywood Brown is going to miss some time early in the season. Xavier Worthy looks awesome in training camp and in preseason, and I think he's going to be fairly close to a full-time player. Certainly as long as Hollywood is out. And but he seems more of like a big play specialist, whereas Rashee Rice is going to be a volume hog. The arrow is still pointing up on Rashee Rice. I think he can have a monster second season.
If defenses continue to dare Mahomes not to throw deep, and this is what they've been doing to Mahomes the last couple of years, they just play back and they force him to throw underneath. That's where Rashee Rice goes nuts. I mean, and if Worthy and Marquise Brown force them to continue to do that, I mean, Rashee Rice is going to have even more room over the middle. I had Rashee Rice as my ideal round 4 pick. I mean, it really just going to come down to how much people are relying on ADP where Rashee Rice goes in your league. I am having a very hard time getting a gauge. Rashee Rice has started to go in the 30s in best ball at this point. So yeah, I think figuring out where Rashee Rice goes in your league, like Evan, I'd be willing to take him as my ideal in the 4th, as early as the 4th for sure. All right. Let's go to round. Oh, I need to give my round 5. My ideal in round 5. I had a few that I could choose from here. I'm going to stick with wide receiver and go with T. Higgins. Really clean setup for T. Higgins with Tyler Boyd gone, Joe Burrow's wrist healthy. T. Higgins is in what's effectively a contract year. Just a really easy bet to make in the 5th round of the draft. Strong talent at the wide receiver position, attached to an elite pocket passing quarterback on a throw first offense. We also have this Jamar Chase hold in stuff. I don't really think that's a factor, but T. Higgins has gotten a lot of work with Joe Burrow already. And supposedly T. Higgins just absolutely tore up the joint practice with the Colts, or the joint scrimmage, wherever they had with the Colts yesterday. So I've always been a T. Higgins guy. I know he's frustrating at times. He gets out there, doesn't play full games, but the upside on T. Higgins here in round 5 would be too much for me to pass on, especially if I start running back quarterback or running back or something like that.
Yeah, he has a lot to play for this season. T. Higgins does. I mean, he could go out and get one of the richest contracts in NFL history after this season. And you look at like the target pecking order in Cincinnati, it's Chase and Higgins. And then, I mean, they don't even really have an established third receiver. I know we like to talk about Andre Yoshevich, but you know, he's certainly far from established. And that's still, I think that's going to be like an ongoing competition at third receiver throughout the season. And then tight end. I mean, I don't think they're going to get much from Mike Gesicki. No one has ever really gotten much from Mike Gesicki. So I think that T. Higgins could actually is an interesting candidate to outkick his ADP, like by a maybe significant margin, and have a really, really strong target share as long as he stays healthy.
Yeah. And to my point earlier, if you start RB, you could still end up with a wide receiver room of Nico Collins, Rashee Rice, and T. Higgins or something like that, you know? And I mean, that's just pure sex. So, you know, that's kind of the stuff that we're talking about. Okay. Let's go to round 6, Evan. Who is your ideal target here in round 6?
So I'm kind of hedging here a little bit, depending on how the first 5 rounds go. If I don't have a tight end and Dalton Kincaid is there, I'm taking him. I think he's a classic example of a tight end that comes in with a lot of hype as a rookie, doesn't earn a full-time role, definitely flashes, but doesn't, isn't like a starting tight end on your fantasy team. And then second year makes a huge leap. Steph Diggs is gone. Gabe Davis is gone. Dalton Kincaid could lead a Josh Allen quarterback offense in receiving in his second season. And the upside is really, really high for him. I mean, I think that it's not crazy to think that he could outscore all fantasy tight ends this year.
Oh, definitely, definitely possible. So Kincaid last year only played on 62% of the snaps, still got a 17% target share, still 24% targets per route run, and now Steph Diggs is gone. My money is for sure on Kincaid to lead this team in catches and yards. Like I do not have a lot of faith in Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, maybe Shakir, but yeah, Dalton Kincaid is for sure.
And I
my
even
favorite
like
in
those
there.
guys a little bit better than you do.
Yeah.
My other player in this round is Deontay Johnson, because I think that his target volume could be extremely high. I think his target share is going to be extremely high. I think there are reasons to believe that. I mean, Bryce Young has to be better than he was as a rookie. They're bringing in Dave Canales. This is the only receiver on the team that can get separation. And Deontay Johnson has consistently gotten separation throughout his career. He's, you can nitpick him. He has too many drops. He isn't great after the catch, but he's going to get open. He's going to command targets. And in a full PPR, especially, I mean, I think that he's going to be a guy that you can rely on week in and week out as a wide receiver 3.
Yeah. I think Deontay is fine. I'm not like excited about Deontay. To me, the best argument for Deontay is Dave Canales turned Mike Evans into a career season at age 30, whatever, with Baker Mayfield. And David Canales also like turned around
I
Geno
don't, I
Smith.
don't, I don't feel comfortable saying that Dave Canales turned Mike Evans into anything.
He had a career season at like 31 or something. That doesn't happen.
I know.
That just doesn't happen. Okay. My ideal for round 6 target would be Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk's Yahoo ADP is actually 81st overall, late 7th. So I'm saying 6th here to allow for some people with brains in your league. Christian Kirk always been really strong in targets per route run, always been pretty strong in yards per route run. The concern on Christian Kirk is, will he be out there in 3 wide receiver sets? I'm a bit shaky there, but I'm not too worried about it either way. Just like I'm not too worried about it on Rome Odunze or Jaden Reed or Tank Dell. I just think there's a really solid floor on Christian Kirk. I think he's better than Gabe Davis, and we'll see on Brian Thomas, but probably better than Brian Thomas also. So I have ceiling concerns on Christian Kirk, but I think the floor is really solid. And if I started QB, I'm going to continue to hammer wide receiver here. And Christian Kirk and Deontay Johnson are certainly, I think, safe ones that you can take in round 6 for sure. I'd also throw Zay Flowers into the mix there as one that I would consider if he lasts till round 6 also. Let's go to round 7, Evan. Who is your ideal target here in round 7?
DeAndre Swift, who right now on Yahoo ADP is the 78th overall player. So middle of that round. He's a player that I moved up recently. By all accounts, he's looked dynamic on the practice field and training camp. He's looked dynamic when he's gotten the football in the preseason games. He's always been a dynamic player, so that's just some confirmation there. And he's going to lose some work to Khalil Herbert, who's a really efficient runner, but doesn't really contribute in any other ways. And Roschon Johnson will mix in. But I just really like the way that this offense has come together. My confidence has risen in the Bears offense, and I feel like I was already optimistic coming in, but it has risen over the course of the summer, and DeAndre Swift is going to be the clear-cut lead back in this offense. I moved him up, I think, to like RB21 recently. I would love to have DeAndre Swift, assuming that I'd take maybe one running back in the first 6 rounds. I would be very comfortable entering the season with DeAndre Swift as my RB2.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you start something like Breece Hall and then you get DeAndre Swift, I think that's a fine way to go for sure there. I would note on the preseason stuff, they've made Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson play a ton. Swift has like barely played. I mean, it seems like they're treating him as their clear-cut feature back / starter. For my round 7, I'm going to go with a guy that we already talked about as to continue to hammer the wide receiver values here through the mid-range. I'm going to go with Xavier Worthy. Just exactly what the Chiefs need. Not Nicole Hardman, not Sky Moore, not a guy who's just fast but can't run routes. A dude who's actually a good route runner, like Worthy is. And then the info that we've heard, we've seen is that this will not be a Rashee Rice situation for Xavier Worthy. He's going to have a big time role right away, even if Marquise Brown is healthy. I mean, I think they're going to run three wide a ton. And yeah, I know Justin Watson is in there right now for Marquise Brown, but the Marquise Brown, Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice three wide receiver set, I think should be out there for 80% of the snaps or more. So I just don't want to overthink this on Xavier Worthy. Fastest ever wide receiver, fastest ever player at the NFL Combine, can actually run routes, and he's playing a ton right away with Patrick Mahomes. Like, I don't want to overthink this on Xavier Worthy. So ideal for me around 7 will indeed be the rookie, Mr. Worthy.
Love that.
Let's go to round 8, Evan. Who do you have for your ideal in round 8?
I have Jackson Smith-Njigba, and he was the first receiver drafted in 2023. He broke his forearm in training camp last year, got off to a really slow start, and just kind of never found his niche in the offense as the season progressed. And he's had a full training camp, full healthy training camp. All the reports have been really positive. I love the way that Geno Smith has talked about him publicly. Like, he's feeling it with Jackson Smith-Njigba. He's going to run the highest percentage routes on the team in the new offense. He's going to be, I think, like a 60 to 70% slot player. Tyler Lockett is aging and is coming off his career worst season. And DK Metcalf has kind of, I think, plateaued as, a player that has never been a great route runner, can win with size and speed, but also isn't a great contested catch guy. Just, he has limitations. I think that Jackson Smith-Njigba can lead this team in receiving, and people are kind of sleeping on him still, with him being allowed to go in the 8th and 9th round, the top receiver drafted last year. I mean,
Yeah.
People had high expectations for him. He didn't meet them. I think we overcorrected in the wrong direction.
Yes. Okay. I like that for sure. Mine in round 8 is a guy that may no longer be available in round 8, given all the buzz that he's been getting. But my round 8 ideal target was Rome Odunze. ADP is 101 overall. I just think in a different wide receiver class, Rome would be going multiple rounds higher in fantasy. But because of DJ Moore and Keenan Allen target earning ability, but I think more importantly, because Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors landed as like true alpha landing spots in terms of what their role will be, people are just forgetting about Rome. I mean, again, ADP of 101. And so what you've seen in the preseason is Keenan Allen look a little bit shaky, which I'm not overly worried about, but it's in my mind. And then you've seen Rome just absolutely ball out. I mean, there are people, like we've talked about, who thought Rome was the best or the second best wide receiver prospect in a historic class of wide receivers. So certainly would take Rome for sure in round 8. If he is available. If not, and you're looking for something else, I have some other ideas like Brian Thomas, etc., to fill out the wide receiver core, but you can probably get him a little bit later than round 8. Round 9, Evan, who is on your target list for round 9?
9th round, staying on the same theme that you kind of just presented with Rome Odunze, I cheated and picked 3 receivers, just a cluster of young, largely unproven receivers who have a lot of opportunity this season. One of them is Brian Thomas. The buzz is picking up on him now, though, and he may start to go earlier. I mean, this guy led the NCAA in touchdown catches last year. He showed absolutely freakish athletic ability at the combine and got off to a slow start in camp, but has really picked it up lately. And I mean, I think he could do special things for the Jaguars offense, just opening things up down the football field. Rashid Shaheed, who, we've talked about. I mean, he's going to be the clear number 2 receiver for the Saints this season. He's been sort of pigeonholed and typecast as a one-trick pony, just vertical guy. But I think he's definitely gotten more in his bag based on how good he's been with the football in his hands as one of the best return men over the last 2 seasons. So I think that there's a lot that can be unlocked there with Rashid Shaheed. And then Jameson Williams, who I think is probably going to go before the 9th round in the vast majority of drafts, but on the Yahoo ADP, he's a 9th round ADP. So I stuck him in here. He's a guy who they have just cleared the deck for him in Detroit. Their number 3 receiver is Khalif Raymond, who's a special teamer and like very small player. And Jameson Williams, the training camp highlights on him have been awesome. And he when they expanded his route tree down the stretch last season, started really trying to get him the football actively, I think that he responded. He's got a ton of talent, the number 12 pick in the draft a couple of years ago. And again, they have cleared the deck for him in Detroit.
I love all those guys, and I think my favorites of those would be Brian Thomas and Jameson Williams. I would have Rashid Shaheed a tier or two below those two guys, but yeah, I actually think that Jameson Williams you can probably get in round 8 or 9, but Brian Thomas and Shaheed, I bet you can get way later than even Evan's saying here, even in round 9. You know, at least a round or two later. So yeah, my ideal for round 9. Okay, so I talked about that barbell approach on the running back show. So hopefully at this point in the draft, I took 2 running backs with my first 3 picks. Then I'm going to let everybody else take these dead zone running backs in the middle, come back here in round 9 with a running back. My favorite, my ideal would be Chase Brown. ADP is currently 117 overall, the 10th round. I think on Chase Brown, yes, Zach Moss is going to play. Yes, Zach Moss is probably the favorite in week 1 for pass down work. But I want to leave room for Chase Brown to get better. He's a young player, showed he can be a workhorse in college. I don't want to just say he can't be the goal line back. He's big. He showed an ability to be a workhorse. I don't want to just say he can't play on pass downs because it's only been 1 year. And so I want to be attached to Joe Burrow, who's very good at throwing to the running back position. Chase Brown, for me, ideal target in round 9. Last round we're going to do is round 10 here. Evan, what do you have for the people as your ideal target in round 10?
Yeah, you want to be attached to Joe Burrow. I want to be attached to Josh Allen. We mentioned Dalton Kincaid earlier. Khalil Shakir, I think, continues to go way later than he should. I had to move him up again recently. I gave him a really big bump up about a week or week and a half ago and moved him up again recently. We'll be talking about rankings changes and news and notes on a show coming up very soon. But Khalil Shakir, I think, among the Bills' wide receivers, not involving Dalton Kincaid, I think Khalil Shakir is set up to lead the team in snaps, targets, catches, all that. And in a Josh Allen quarterbacked offense, like there's a lot of potential value there for a guy who was going in the 10th and 11th rounds.
Yep. Oh, right. 10th round for me. If you don't have a quarterback yet, somebody like Caleb Williams might still be available. Maybe not with all the hype around him. But yeah, when I'm talking about quarterback in my draft, I'm thinking about quarterback in a home league draft. I'm just watching what everyone else is doing. I'm assuming they're not going to take 2 of the top 11 or so. And so watching what everyone else is doing and trying to pick off a value here or there. Maybe that's Caleb Williams in round 10. Maybe that's Jaden Daniels in round 9 or something. But that's why I didn't have too much quarterback talk in here outside of the Jalen Hurts thing. My ideal in round 10, though, would be Jordan Addison. Now, going into this offseason, I actually thought that Jordan Addison's outlook profile was pretty similar to Jack Smith and Jigba, Brian Thomas, guys who were going in the 70s in best ball. Then Jordan Addison has another off-field issue. He has an ankle sprain. That stuff is certainly scary, and it's really pushed his ADP down to where he's like almost free. There is, though, a lot of speculation first that Jordan Addison won't be suspended at all this year. I mean, his first court date isn't until October 7th, and that's just to enter a plea. It's not even the actual case. So Drew Davenport, other people have suggested Addison unlikely to be suspended this year at all. And then on the ankle, it doesn't sound like a Josh Downs thing. It doesn't sound like a high ankle sprain. Vikings have said it's not overly serious. They don't expect him to miss extended time. So Jordan Addison in this scheme, in this offense, I know people are worried about Sam Darnold, but the profile and talent on Addison here in round 10 would just be another example of wide receivers I like that I can get really, really late in these kind of drafts. All right. For more on targets and everything, please head to the site. We do have all staff sleepers and busts. We have the abusing the default rankings, which I think you definitely should read if you have a draft on ESPN, Yahoo, or Sleeper. Super important there. My perfect draft article will be up by Thursday, and tons more all in the draft kit tab on Establish the Run. 4. Evan. 4. Producer Ryan. 4. Producer Luke. Do not forget to check out our YouTube. Just to put up another video there about home league draft strategy. I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.